Good evening, everyone. So I'm here tonight representing AARP, but I'm also wearing another hat tonight, and that is the hat of being a Brown University alumni. And when I knew that I was going to present it, I thought about a few people from Brown, some common professors that Lynn and I had. Lynn, I'm going to say the name, George Houston Bass. And George was a professor in the theater department in the African American Studies department at Brown. George was a very colorful character. And one day in a class that Lynn was in, George had the students close their eyes and he put something in their hand. And George had been the executive assistant to Langston Hughes for a number of years and was the executor of his estate. And when the students, including Lynn, opened up their hand, they had a piece of Langston Hughes' bones. And as I said, George passed away in 1990, but Lynn, I want to call forth George's spirit tonight because I know it's in you, and I know it's in the plays and the words that you write, and I know George is here with you in this moment. Lynn and I also shared another professor. There's a woman by the name of Paula Vogel who taught English in the theater department at Brown. Some of you may know the name because Paula Vogel, like Lynn, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright. Well, she taught Lynn and I both at Brown. And Lynn was going to be a doctor when she was at Brown. She was very good in math and science. But over time, she discovered that wasn't her calling. And then I understand she thought she was going to be a journalist. And Paula Vogel said to her in her playwriting class one day, well, Lynn, why don't you become a playwright? And that has made all the difference. And interestingly, a couple of years ago, both Lynn and Paula, student and teacher, debuted with two different plays on Broadway at the same time. So when I was going to present this award, I reached out to Paula. I said, Paula, could you please give me a message to give to Lynn for this auspicious occasion? Quote, weeds and nettles, briars and thorns have thriven under your shadow. Dissettlement and division, discontentment and dissatisfaction together with real dangers to the hold, end quote. Thus, Oliver Cromwell in 1653 spoke to the Parliament as he dissolved it. I find it a great comfort to read quotes from those who have lived in extremity before us. In a world where weeds and nettles, briars and thorns are the only growth industry in a Trumpian dystopia, the works of Margaret Atwood seem to echo the times. But enter Lynn Nottage. Because Lynn Nottage weds her own moral compass to her own empathic heart to catch the division, to pierce the shadows where we as real people have been set adrift from our better selves. Lynn, as we grow more dissettled, our need for your voice and the order of your play words become more necessary. The factory worker removed from a way of life, a seamstress betrayed, survivors of sexual violence in the Congo. What is most essential to the lodestar of our better selves and to the hope of American justice, deferred for centuries, is the resiliency of your characters. Lynn, thank you for the body of your work. I am so grateful to be living in a time when your words are upon our stages. And lucky us, I know the best is yet to come in your work ahead. Much love, Paula. Ladies and gentlemen, our international playwright winner, my fellow Brown University alum, Lynn Nottage.
Lynn Nottage is a member of the elite and exclusive club of multiple Pulitzer-winning American playwrights, which include August Wilson, Tennessee Williams, Eugene O'Neill, Edward Albee, Robert E. Sherwood, and Thornton Wilder. She's a two-time Pulitzer-winning playwright and screenwriter who has made history as the first woman to win 2 Pulitzer Prizes for her play, Sweat, her first on Broadway, and again in 2009 for Ruined, which was produced off-Broadway. This Brooklyn native at the age of 8 had already written her first play, inspired in part by the women in her family. A graduate of New York's High School of Music and Art, she enrolled at Brown University, received a BA degree and continued her studies, and received an MFA degree in playwriting at the prestigious Yale School of Drama. It was her work at Amnesty International that gave her a global view of her career goals. Her first break came with the musical A, My Name is Alice. In '96, the Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago produced one of her best-known plays, Crumbs from the Table of Joy. Following a 7-year hiatus, Lynn returned with an acclaimed drama, Intimate Apparel. That won major awards, the New York Drama Critics Circle Award, the Francesca Primus Prize, and the Steinberg Award. In 2004, actress Viola Davis won a Drama Desk Award for her outstanding performance in Intimate Apparel. Currently, the play is being adapted into an opera, commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera and Lincoln Center Theater. For sharing her artistry with the world as co-founder of Market Road Films and breaking new ceilings for women of color on stage and screen is why Lynn Nottage is Cafe Mocha's Salute Her 2019 International Playwright honoree.
Thank you, Reggie, for that beautiful introduction. And I just want to say that I always carry George Bass with me wherever I go, and that just recently I touched the bone of Langston Hughes because I needed to touch it, and I still have it, and it was one of the greatest gifts that I've ever been given. Tonight, thank you to Sheila and Gwendolyn and the Cafe Mocha radio team. I so appreciate this award, and like LaTanya, I'm battling with a cold, but I knew that I had to be here, and I'm just very grateful. Just a little bit about me. When I was growing up, the very first place that I encountered theater was in my mother's kitchen. When I'd come home from school, inevitably my mother, my grandmother, and a whole handful of women would be sitting around the table. They'd have this huge jug of Mondavi wine right in the center, and they didn't leave until that jug was finished. And as a kid, I do my homework literally sitting at that table listening to these women talk, and they had these beautiful names like Azora and Linnell and Velmanette and Eugenia, and I just sort of bathed in, in their stories, which were sometimes beautiful and sometimes bittersweet. And when my mother got sick, and she got sick relatively young, I remember that same group of beautiful black women came every single day and still sat at that table, even though she couldn't move and she couldn't speak. And eventually, when she could no longer sit at that table and was bedbound, that same group of women every single day came and they sat by her. And then, when my mother died, and I'll never forget this, she didn't let go of her last breath until that same group of women formed a circle. They said the Lord's Prayer, and she went from the world. And in that moment when my mother died, I was devastated as one would be, but I also felt that I lost that circle of women and those storytellers, and I never thought that I would be able to reconstitute that. But then I began writing again because they said there were 7 years in which I didn't write. That 7 years was the period in which I was trying to heal and trying to reconstitute my circle. And I realized that the reason I write is to keep those women alive. And the reason that I write is really to give breath to the stories that they told. And part of the reason that this award is so special to me is that standing here and looking into this audience, I see that circle of women, and I feel gratified that in some small way that I've kept that spirit alive, and so thank you.